An optimist said to a pessimist, "Isn't it a bright and sunny day?" The pessimist replied, "Yes, but if this heat spell doesn't stop, all the grass will burn up." 2 days later, the optimist said to the pessimist, "Isn't this rain wonderful?" The pessimist replied, "Well, if it doesn't stop, my garden will wash away." The next day, the optimist invited the pessimist to go duck hunting. The optimist wanted to show off his new registered hunting dog, and this dog could do no things like any other dog could do. The pessimist looked at the dog and said, "Looks like a mutt to me." At this moment, a flock of ducks flew over. The optimist shot one of the ducks, and it fell down in the middle of the lake. He snapped his fingers, and his new dog ran after the duck. The dog ran on top of the water, picked up the duck, ran back on the water. The optimist took the duck from the dog's mouth and turned to the pessimist and said, "What do you think of my new dog now?" The pessimist said, "Dumb dog, can't even swim." So we hear a story in here of David, of perceptions and how we see our world around us. So I want to retell the story in the storytelling way of Scripture. Our story today focuses on David, a young shepherd who was brought before Israel's monarch. Saul first questioned him, and then he tried to dissuade him from what appeared to be a foolish course of action. David's reply was indicative of the faith that activated in him. "Let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go fight this Philistine. Your servant will be tending the father's sheep when a lion and a bear came and took away a sheep out of the flock. I went out after him and struck him down and delivered it from his mouth. And when it rose up against me, I took him down by his beard and struck him and killed him down. Your servant will strike this Philistine as well." Saul realizing that David could not be dissuaded from taking on Goliath, Saul offered him the young shepherd using of his armor. Outwardly, this gesture appeared to be generous. A coat of mail was to be very carefully forged. It also was very costly, and few in Israel possessed one. Apparently, Saul believed that this young champion could not be armed in less adequately than his opponent. David, however, was smaller than Saul and could not move with ease with the added weight of armor. David realized that he must have superior maneuverability to be able to be successful against Goliath. So, declining Saul's offer, David took with him only those weapons that he knew was familiar to him, his sling and his club. In picking up the gauntlet Goliath had thrown down, David was not foolhardy. He was activated by a strong inner principle. In his eyes, it was inconceivable for a nation to believe in the Lord to cower down before pagans, no matter how strong they were. Human logic might have implied that he was embarking on a fool's errand, but his confidence in the God of his fathers was so strong it assured him of victory. Putting aside Saul's armor, David descended down the hillside, and as he crossed a small stream, he chose 5 smooth stones. Put those smooth stones in the shepherd's pouch, and as Saul and his men watched him with bated breath, David made his way towards the Philistine champion. Because of the heat of the day and the heaviness of his armor, Goliath had been sitting down. The stir in the ranks of his Philistine army caused him to look up. He was surprised to see that a boy was coming out against him. His first words were ones of disdain. He had expected a tall, muscular man who might prove to be a worthy opponent. "Am I a dog," he says, "that you come out to me with sticks?" Goliath showed furthermore contempt for this shepherd by hurling curses at him. The giant's boastful attitude was typical of the speeches we heard. David was undismayed by this profane and villainous tactics. His answer was calm and poignant. You are coming to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I am coming to you in the name of Yahweh, the God of Israel, whom you have reproached. This day Yahweh will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. On hearing David's word, Goliath became mad. Believing that David had insulted him before the armies of Philistine, Goliath rose to his feet, advanced to meet David. And instead of retreating as Goliath had expected, David ran forward. He was remarkably calm under pressure. The excitement of the moment did not unnerve him. As he hastened towards the giant, David took from his shepherd bag one of the stones, put it into the pouch of his sling, whirled it 3 times above his head, and released one end of it. The stone flew unerringly towards its mark. Too late for the armor bearer to try to raise the shield to block off the stone. It struck Goliath, the small part of his head underneath the unguarded of his helmet, and stopped him right in his tracks. For a moment, he tottered back and forth. The soldiers on both of the banks held their breath. Then ever so slowly, he began to fall forward, gathering momentum as he fell. There was a loud clanging of armor as Goliath's huge frame crashed to the ground. So in this story, we hear of David going to fight an army's champion. Do you think David should have looked like an army's champion going out there? That's what everyone expects for us to look like, right? To go out and meet one-on-one with the same tools. After all, Goliath looked that way. His very impressive armor is described in very good detail. It weighed upwards of 150 pounds. You're going to need at least a sword, a bronze helmet, and a prodigious coat of mail, because that's what champions and warriors wear. That's how they dress. That's how they do battle. Trouble is, Saul's battle gear did not fit David. It's way too big. It's way too heavy. David can't even walk in it. He tries, but there's no going forward. It's okay to laugh at this image. It's kind of ludicrous, isn't it? But this line in the very end of verse 39 and into verse 40 isn't funny. It's maybe the most important of all what happens in this whole story, and helps us figure out and find ourselves in this time of how. David took off his armor, all of it and every piece of it. Then he got the stuff he knew how to use: a shepherd's staff, his bag, some smooth stones from the wadi, and his sling. David took the gifts that God had given him, that he knew how to use, and how he could win against Goliath. Do we find it that we say that if I only had this skill, I would do what I needed to do, what I would win with? If I had this gift, that I could beat any Goliath in my life? Or we could even say, if I didn't have this problem, I could succeed. I admit, I've said some of these things in my life. When I was struggling to see God's call in my life, I would say, if I didn't have epilepsy, I would be able to do whatever I wanted to be. Well, let me tell you, did you hear the mistake I made? Did you hear it? It what it was when I say what I wanted instead of what God wanted for me. We can also say these things when it comes to good things and bad things we face. When we face the opposition, how many times have we heard or said, if we could only get rid of what's wrong in our lives would be better. If we could just eliminate all those bad things, it could be good for us. How could we see or learn from our mistakes if we get rid of all those bad things? How could we learn to be one with Christ without the opposition? There's two ways we can face opposition in our daily lives and face the Goliaths. And I want to turn to the story and show you how you can face these. In our story, there's reason and emotion. If David used only reason, he would say, I have to use the armor to help me, because that's what is going to protect me and win. On the other hand, if he used emotion, he would walk up and see Goliath's big stature, and on his motion just run away, not even fight him. But he took a little bit of both, emotion and reason. And when you take both of those, you have wisdom. And what he did is he used his wisdom of God to show him the way. When we face life struggles, it can seem like a large Goliath in our lives. How do we face these Goliaths and these oppositions? Do we face the opposition with reason, unprepared, not accepting God's true gifts in our lives? Or do we face these times of opposition with emotions and run? When we face it with wisdom and with God behind us, with the knowledge of His gifts in our life, we can share it to go to victory. So let me tell you one more thing. Giants are not as strong and powerful as they may seem. And sometimes the shepherd boy has a sling in his pocket.